Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. The mountain did not learn to be tall. It remembered. Stones slept for ages beneath a blanket of mist, and in that quiet, the sky practiced how to breathe. On the highest shoulder of the world, where snow kept the secrets of ancient fires, a hush gathered that felt like a hand over the heart. It was there, between one breath and the next, that a spark opened its eye. No one saw it, because seeing belongs to light, and light had not yet been told to speak so loudly. But the mountain felt it. A pulse, soft as a bird inside an uncracked shell. The pulse was not anger. It was emphasis. It was not a weapon. It was a promise. When it beat again, the cloud above the summit curved inward as if listening to a story meant only for it. Far below, shepherds drowsed beside their flocks. They did not know the name of the God who exhaled behind their dreams, but their bodies leaned toward the mountain without standing, as grass leans toward rain before rain arrives. Their dogs lifted their heads and set them down again. A child asleep in a cart dreamed of a white bull walking across the sea without getting wet. Somewhere in a temple with no roof, a woman pressed her palm to the cold face of a pillar and felt warmth travel through stone. Up where air thins to thought, the pulse became breath. Sky pulled itself deeper into its lungs, and the shape of that breath was a name, Zeus. He did not descend. He condensed. He gathered out of vapor and memory, out of the hush kept by cedar forests and the vigilance of eagles. When he opened his eyes, the mountain answered by standing a little taller, and the cloud uncurled like a scroll being read by thunder's fingertip. Not yet, Zeus whispered, not to hold back power, but to honor timing. Storms are not the violence of the sky. They are the sky's education. A lesson must be placed gently in the hand, or the hand will learn to fear learning. So he stood within the cloud like a priest inside a breath, and he waited for the world to be ready to listen. The winds arrived first. Not the rending gales that tear roofs from houses, but the elders of the air. Boreas with a memory of snow hidden in his beard, Notice smelling of apricot rain. Eurus carrying the restlessness of roads. Zephyrus soft as first shade at noon. They circled Zeus and bowed, each bringing a thread of weather for him to weave. Teach us the weight of a word, said Boreas, so that we do not mistake volume for truth. Teach us the speed of mercy, said Notice, so that rain will fall in time, not in panic. Teach us the bend of a path, said Eurus, so that wandering becomes pilgrimage. Teach us the smile of dusk, said Zephyrus, so that endings can arrive without fear. Zeus lifted his hand, and the cloud became a loom. He wove their threads into a single breath, then placed that breath upon his tongue. The mountain leaned closer. The sheep below shifted in sleep. The woman at the roofless temple took her hand from the pillar, and its warmth remained. When Zeus exhaled, He did not release thunder yet. He taught silence how to listen for it. Silence learned. It stretched across the valleys like a great canvas waiting for the first stroke. Birds paused mid-song the way scribes lift their pens before a holy word. Even the river slowed at its own bend, as if the water wished to overhear what it would soon carry to the sea. Then Zeus spoke, not with a shout, but with a breath shaped like a promise kept. Lightning walked out of his mouth as calmly as a pilgrim leaving home for the first time. It touched the crown of an ancient pine and divided itself into 1,000 silver paths, each one a syllable of the same word. Awaken. Thunder arrived afterward, not as a blow but as a river of bass, rolling through the ribs of the world, teaching stone to resonate without breaking. No one fled. In the valley, the shepherd's dreams grew bright at the edges, like parchments lit from behind. The child in the cart turned and smiled without waking. In the roofless temple, the woman knelt, not because she was small, but because kneeling taught her the height of her heart. High on the mountain, snow released its softness into the air as mist, and mist laid its cool hands on Zeus's shoulders like an old friend who knows the weight of crowns. Another breath, and the lesson deepened. The second lightning did not seek the tallest tree. It sought the loneliest stone. When it touched that hard, forgotten face, the stone remembered warmth and gave it back as color. Thunder followed, rolling slower this time, letting the valleys answer. Caves hummed. Owls listened from their doorways. Foxes raised their noses, caught the clean scent that runs ahead of rain, and rejoiced that their dens would forgive their absence. Not conquest, Zeus whispered. Conversation. His voice traveled without hurry, a tide of sound that did not drown what it taught. Not command. Communion. The winds understood. Boreas loosened the straps that hold winter too tight. Notice braided his reins more finely, so fields might drink rather than choke. Eurus learned to pause at crossroads long enough to read what the dust was writing. And Zephyrus practiced the art of leaving, so that arrival would not be a grief. From the far edges of the sky old storms stirred. They had been sleeping in the blue like seeds in a jar, waiting for a gardener who knew when to plant. Zeus invited them, one by one, to remember, not their anger, but their purpose. He called the storm that polishes mountains without stealing them. He called the storm that teaches sailors how to pray and then how to row. He called the storm that enters towns with open hands and leaves behind emptied cisterns and full wells. Begin, he said, and he breathed. Rain came like the first letter of a long, kind book. It tapped roofs with the patience of a teacher's knuckle, then lifted the scent of dust until the world smelled like a page turned over. The sheep woke without fear and stood to greet the taste of grass remade. The child in the cart opened her eyes just enough to watch a single drop land on the rim and shiver. In the temple with no roof, the woman tilted her face and offered it to the sky as if the sky were a friend who had traveled far to speak only once. Zeus stepped forward to the edge of the cloud and looked down. He did not measure the storm by how loudly it spoke, but by how much it allowed others to speak around it. He listened to the consonants of rain, to the vowels of wind between hill and ridge, to the punctuation of far thunder. What he heard was not chaos. It was grammar, weather's grammar, where lightning is an accent, thunder a cadence, rain an agreement, and wind the generosity that moves meaning from mouth to mouth. He could end it. He could lift his palm and clear the sky, leave the valley as dry and unafraid as a closed book. Power, after all, loves a finished sentence. But stories are not true because they end. They are true because they breathe. So Zeus let the storm continue until the leaves learned the taste of their own weight, until the rivers recalled how to welcome tributaries without pride, until the people beneath roofs remembered to step outside and bow to a world that still wished to touch them. By midnight the mountain gleamed, not with ice and not with fire, but with a breath so steady the stars arranged themselves around it, the way candles arrange themselves around a sleeping child. Zeus lowered his gaze. In that lowering was tenderness, the kind that knows it is stronger when it rests. He turned to the winds. "Carry this," he said. "Tell the forests that thunder is not a threat but a teacher. Tell the villages that lightning does not punish. It points. Tell the oceans that the sky has learned to exhale without forgetting to inhale." They bowed and went, and in their going the storm found its path to gentleness. Rain became a veil, then a mist, then a kiss left on bark, on stone, on the small coins of leaves. Thunder stepped back into the earth and slept in the roots. Lightning folded itself into the marrow of mountains, a bookmark in a book that the sky promised to keep reading. Zeus remained a while longer at the summit, listening to what his breath had taught. He felt the mountain's gratitude travel through him, warm, heavy, true. He felt the valley's relief, the river's new patience, the temple's keen and wordless joy. He watched the child in the cart fall into a deeper sleep, and he blessed the dream without changing it. At last he closed his eyes, not to vanish but to return, as thunder returns after lightning, as meaning returns after a pause. And the night took a longer breath, and the world learned how to rest inside it. When the first lightning struck the newborn sky, the world did not yet have a language. There was only sound, pure, trembling, unshaped. Zeus, still young and fierce, listened to that silence between thunderclaps and felt the pulse of creation itself. He began to understand that the storm was not only destruction, it was memory. Every flash that split the sky was a word. Every roll of thunder was a sentence, old as the bones of the earth. In that sacred noise, the gods spoke in sparks. It was not a tongue of mortals, not yet. It was rhythm, breath, vibration. Zeus felt it run through him, into the stones beneath his feet, into the roots that clung to the mountain's skin. He raised his hand, and the air trembled. Lightning obeyed not because it feared, but because it knew him. For a god does not command, he remembers. And Zeus remembered the sound before sound, the breath before breath. The grammar of lightning was written not in ink, but in rhythm. 1 heartbeat for truth, 2 for power, 3 for mercy, 4 for balance. It was the rhythm of all things that lived, and all that would one day return to silence. There were moments when even the storm hesitated, when thunder died before it was born. In those pauses, the god heard the whisper of the fates, threads twisting, weaving the world into patterns he could not yet see. Zeus knelt and pressed his hand against the wet stone. "Teach me," he said to the earth. "Show me the shape of your silence." The mountain did not speak in words, but in warmth, a slow hum, like the echo of fire deep below. It was then that Zeus understood. Lightning was the breath of the mountain itself, exhaled into the heavens. The storm was the meeting of 2 hearts, one of sky, one of stone. Days turned to ages. Mortals built temples, but none yet knew his name. They only knew the sound, thunder, and bowed when it came. They thought it was anger, but the gods do not shout in rage. They sing in memory. Every strike of light across the sky was Zeus writing his name in the air, a language no one yet could read. In a dream, he descended into the heart of the storm. There the sky opened like a wound. Rain fell not as water, but as silver tears of the forgotten wind. Within that endless void, a voice spoke, calm, ancient, unshaken. "You wish to speak the tongue of the storm," it said. "Then learn the silence that births it." Zeus stood beneath 1,000 streaks of light, each one frozen in the air. They were words, the vocabulary of creation. He reached toward one, and it burned into his palm, a mark shaped like a spiral, glowing faintly. The storm whispered, "This is not power. This is memory. Every lightning you call will remember the first." When he woke, the mark was gone, but the hum remained. He could hear the grammar of the storm in every breath. He began to speak it without knowing, in the rustle of leaves, in the crack of stone, in the sigh of the wind. And when he did, the world began to answer. Rivers bent toward him as though remembering the ocean. Mountains shifted their weight, murmuring in sleep. The stars pulsed in rhythm once, twice, thrice. The universe, for a heartbeat, remembered it was one. Yet every gift carries its weight. For to speak the language of the storm is to feel its sorrow. Zeus began to hear cries hidden inside thunder, the voices of mortals asking the sky for mercy, the sound of trees breaking under wind, the whisper of fire consuming all it touched. He learned that to wield lightning was not to rule, but to listen. Every strike was a promise, every roar a confession. The storm did not serve, it remembered. In time he descended to the plains. Mortals gathered beneath black clouds, eyes wide in fear. Their fires flickered, their voices trembling as they prayed to unseen gods. Zeus watched, and for the first time he heard them. Their words were clumsy, but their rhythm was pure, the same rhythm as thunder, the same heartbeat. He lifted his hand once more, not in fury, but in understanding. Lightning cracked, but this time it struck the river. Steam rose, golden and soft. The people gasped, and the rain fell not to destroy, but to bless. That night they named him Zeus, they whispered, the breath of the sky. They did not yet know that their prayers were part of the storm's song. From that day, every bolt that danced between heaven and earth carried both voices, divine and mortal, woven together in rhythm. It was no longer just thunder. It was a dialogue, the first prayer ever answered by light. Zeus climbed once more to the high peaks. There the wind bowed to him, not in fear, but in kinship. He closed his eyes and exhaled, and lightning answered. He no longer needed words. The grammar of lightning was complete, a language not spoken, but felt. Every god, every mortal, every blade of grass would learn its rhythm in time. For all things born beneath the storm carry a trace of its breath. And as the centuries passed, mortals began to mimic that rhythm. Drums echoed thunder. Poets shaped lines to the cadence of rain. Hearts learned to beat in sync with the sky. They thought it art, but it was remembrance, the body echoing the memory of Zeus's breath. When the god looked upon the world, he smiled. He no longer needed to roar. Silence now carried his name. In the stillness after a storm, when the air smells of fire and rain, that is where Zeus sleeps, not in temples, not on thrones, but in the hush between thunder and lightning, where language is born again. The storm had raged for 7 days, not upon the earth, but within Zeus himself. Above Mount Olympus, the air trembled beneath his heartbeat. Each pulse of his chest birthed new clouds. Each breath drew lightning from the marrow of the sky. Mortals below spoke of his fury, but fury was not the word. It was memory, a memory of power, of the first spark that had ever been born from chaos. He stood alone among the clouds, the taste of ozone upon his tongue. His golden hair tangled in the wind. He had watched the mortals cry for rain, for warmth, for life, and he had given it to them. Yet their prayers carried something he could not understand, something softer than lightning, something heavier than thunder. When the sky calmed, a strange silence filled the air, one that even he, the Lord of storms, did not command. Beneath that silence he descended, through mist and mountain, through the hollow roar of distant thunder. Zeus followed a whisper that was not made of wind, a whisper that spoke not of power but of balance. He followed it down to the edge of the sea, where the horizon swallowed light. There, upon a rock polished by centuries of rain, sat a figure he had long forgotten. It was his own reflection, caught in the trembling skin of the water. And for the first time in eternity, Zeus looked into it without pride. The reflection did not smile. It asked, Why do you command what you cannot calm? The question cut deeper than any lightning. He had built the heavens to rule them, shaped the storms to serve him. Yet now his own creation rumbled against his chest, restless as a caged beast. Zeus knelt, the sea sprang against his knees, and whispered to the waves, "If I am the sky, what is left for me to fear?" The sea replied only in echoes, and somewhere, deep within those echoes, he heard his own name, not as a title but as a plea. That night the god of thunder dreamed. He dreamed of the first storm, not of war or wrath, but of awakening. He remembered how the universe had once been silent, until the first sound, his breath, had rippled through the void. He had been born from power, but power had never been born from him. The breath that made the stars was not rage. It was wonder. When he awoke, the dawn trembled on the horizon, gold bleeding into gray. And in that fragile moment between night and day, Zeus understood what he had forgotten. Even storms must rest, and even gods must breathe. He lifted his hand. Lightning danced between his fingers, no longer wild, but gentle, like a promise. He released it into the clouds, not as punishment, but as a lullaby. The sky answered with rain. Each drop fell like forgiveness, and the mountains below whispered his name, not in fear, but in gratitude. For the first time since the birth of Olympus, Zeus had spoken not with thunder, but with silence. Later, when the sun rose and the world shimmered in dew, Hera found him upon the edge of the storm. Her eyes held both distance and memory. "You've changed," she said. "Perhaps," Zeus replied, watching the light gather upon the clouds. "I have remembered that power without heart is only noise." Hera smiled faintly. "And heart without power is a whisper waiting for thunder," he said. The wind carried her laughter across the mountain, soft as the first breeze after a long rain. And in that laughter he felt the world breathe again. Far below Olympus, the mortals looked to the heavens and wondered why the storms had grown quiet. They did not know that the God above had found his own heartbeat within the calm. To them, the thunder's silence meant safety. To Zeus, it meant understanding. He walked once more into the clouds, not as a tyrant, but as a guardian, the keeper of breath and balance. Each storm he shaped from that day forward carried both fury and forgiveness. For he had learned that the sky's greatest gift was not its fire, but its rhythm. He would still roar, yes, but now, after every roar, came a moment of stillness. A single breath where gods and mortals alike could hear the truth that thunder had tried to hide, that even the mightiest must rest. When night fell again, the world below slept beneath a sky unbroken by fear. The stars glimmered like the quiet pulse of a god who had learned to listen. And as the moon rose, bathing Olympus in silver, Zeus closed his eyes, not in weariness, but in peace. Somewhere within the infinite breath of the heavens, the storm sighed, and for the first time, smiled. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. If you wish to dream deeper, you may find more stories among the stars. The thunder had grown quiet. For the first time in centuries, Olympus listened not to the roar of Zeus's might, but to the rhythm of his breath. The wind, once fierce and restless, now moved like thought, slow, deliberate, full of memory. Each breeze that crossed the mountains seemed to carry whispers of something forgotten. A language spoken before time had a voice. Zeus walked through his halls, not in pride, but in reflection. He touched the marble pillars that gleamed with dawnlight, and felt how cold they were, untouched by the warmth of living hands. For ages he had built palaces of gold and thunder, yet had never built peace within himself. Now, after the storm within, he began to see. Outside, the clouds drifted apart like curtains of sleep, revealing the blue beyond. For the mortals below, this calm was grace. For Zeus it was revelation. He descended once more from Olympus, but not as a god come to command. This time he came as the wind itself, soft, unseen, everywhere at once. He moved through forests where rain still clung to the leaves, through villages where children played, unafraid of the sky. And as he passed, he heard laughter, that fragile, sacred sound that lightning could never create. He remembered, then, the time when he and the world had been one breath. Before temples, before worship, before fear. When gods were simply the pulse of creation, and thunder was not wrath, but rhythm. By a quiet river, he saw an old man kneeling beside the water, mending a broken net. Each knot tied was a prayer, each whisper a conversation with something unseen. "Do you still believe in the gods?" Zeus asked, though the man could not see him. The fisherman smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the calm sky. "I believe in what listens when I speak," he said. "Names fade, temples fall, but the wind always answers." Zeus felt something stir within him, not power, not divinity, but something humbler, gratitude. For the first time, the god of thunder bowed his head to a mortal's truth. When night fell, he sat upon the mountain once more, gazing at the horizon. The stars shimmered like memories, each one a story he had forgotten to hear. A soft voice reached him, "Hera's," again. "You've been quiet," she said, her presence a soft light beside him. "I'm listening," he replied. "To what?" "To the silence," he said, and smiled faintly. "It speaks more honestly than thunder ever did." Hera studied him, her expression a blend of affection and wonder. "You were not made for stillness, my love." "Perhaps not," Zeus answered, "but the world was, and I have been too loud for too long." Below them, the world shimmered in moonlight. Mountains glowed with dew. Oceans breathed softly against their shores. Every leaf trembled with the same rhythm, the rhythm of balance. Zeus closed his eyes, and within the dark behind them he saw everything. The birth of stars, the fall of titans, the cry of a newborn child, and in it all one single truth. Creation was never about dominance. It was about continuity, and silence, he realized, was not the opposite of thunder. It was its completion. In the dreams of mortals that night, the storm took a new shape, no longer a destroyer, but a teacher. The thunder rolled softly, like a drumbeat to remind them of their own hearts. Rain fell not in violence, but as a song. Each drop carried a spark of remembrance, that the gods above were not separate, but reflections of the same breath that moved within all living things. And high above it all Zeus watched, a quiet guardian of sound and silence. He did not banish storms anymore. He let them come and go, for even chaos had its place in harmony. When dawn came again, the sky was gold and blue, and the first light touched the peak of Olympus like a gentle crown. Zeus stood upon it, feeling the pulse of the world in his chest, the same rhythm he once mistook for thunder. He whispered, not to mortals, not to gods, but to the wind itself, "May the storm never forget its silence." And somewhere deep in the clouds, the thunder answered softly, like laughter, "Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. Tonight, the storm rests, but the sky remembers. The wind returned, not as thunder, not as fury, but as memory." Zeus stood at the edge of Olympus, gazing into the horizon where clouds slept like folded silk. He could feel the pulse of the world beneath him, slow and steady, like a heart that had learned to beat without fear. The storm was over, yet within its silence he felt something stirring, a breath, ancient and infinite, the same breath that had once shaped the heavens. For all his reign, he had believed creation began with his lightning, a flash that split chaos apart. But now, as he listened to the wind move between the stars, he understood creation had never been loud. It had always been quiet. The first sound in existence was not thunder. It was a whisper. He descended once more, this time not as a god, but as the echo of one. The world below shimmered with dew. Oceans stretched like living mirrors, reflecting the breath of dawn. Mountains, rivers, and forests carried his name, but they no longer bowed to it. They simply lived. Zeus passed through a valley where shepherds sang to their flocks. Their songs were soft and human, songs of longing, of gratitude, of tomorrow. Every note rose into the sky like a prayer, and the wind caught it, weaving it into the rhythm of the clouds. He smiled, realizing that even mortals could summon storms, not with power, but with faith. That night, when the stars gathered above the Aegean, he visited the ancient temple of his youth, a ruin now, half buried in vines. He walked through the columns where once he had been worshipped in fear. Now moss and ivy traced his name upon stone, and small flowers bloomed where lightning had once struck. The air was thick with the scent of rain and memory. Zeus sat among the fallen pillars, his reflection shimmering in a pool of still water before him. For a long time he said nothing. Then he spoke, not to the heavens, but to the reflection that looked back. "Have you forgiven yourself?" he asked quietly. The water rippled, distorting his face. For a moment, he saw not a god, but a man weary, timeless, longing to rest. "No," he whispered, "but I am learning to listen." And in that moment, the wind stirred again, soft, circular, eternal. From the west came a golden light. Helios, rising from his chariot, casting morning fire upon the calm sea. Zeus stood, letting the warmth embrace him. He had always been the ruler of sky and storm, but for the first time he bowed to the light. "Brother of flame," he said to the sun, "do you still burn for creation?" Helios's light shimmered, answering without words. "Yes, but gently." For even the sun, Zeus realized, understood the cost of eternal fire. The gods had once believed that to exist was to rule, to shape the world through dominance. But perhaps existence, in its truest form, was not power, it was participation. Every wind, every drop, every flicker of flame was part of the same breath, the breath before creation. In the mortal world, thunder was now a memory told in myths. Children grew up hearing stories of the god who once commanded the skies, but who one day became the silence within them. Yet in rare nights, when the sea and sky blurred together, sailors claimed to feel him again. Not in fear but in guidance, a current that pushed their sails home, a whisper that warned of unseen storms. Zeus had become something new, not the ruler of Olympus, but its pulse. Deep beneath the clouds, Hera walked among the meadows of Thessaly, where thunderflowers bloomed, petals shaped like lightning bolts. When the wind brushed past, they released tiny sparks, glowing like fireflies. She gathered one, holding it close. She could feel Zeus in its light, gentle, constant, infinite. "Even now you watch," she murmured. "Even now you breathe." The sky rumbled faintly in answer, not in storm but in laughter. Hera smiled. "Then rest, beloved," she whispered. "Let the world carry your name in its wind." In the realm between stars, the other gods stirred from their slumber. Poseidon's waves grew calmer. Demeter's fields shimmered with endless harvest, and Athena's wisdom flowed through the hearts of poets and dreamers. All creation felt the shift, as if the heartbeat of the cosmos had found a slower, truer rhythm. For the first time, there was no fear of silence, only understanding. Zeus drifted now between clouds and eternity, watching over the world not as a god of command, but as a guardian of balance. He saw children light fires not to worship him, but to warm each other. He saw kings who prayed not for victory, but for peace. He saw lovers whisper their hopes into the wind, and felt their words become thunderless prayers. Each of these small moments, he realized, was more divine than any temple ever built in his name. And he felt the spark of the first fire, the one that began all creation, reignite within his chest. Not to destroy, but to illuminate. The storm had learned to breathe, and now so had he. He rose once more to the highest cloud, where the boundary between sky and eternity disappeared. The wind wrapped around him like memory, soft, endless, alive. He spoke not in command, but in devotion. May every storm remember its silence, and every silence remember the fire that gave it breath. The lightning answered not with fury, but with light, golden, gentle, endless. It flowed through the sky like the first heartbeat of creation reborn. And so, when mortals dream beneath the whisper of thunder, they no longer fear its echo, for in that sound, they hear the voice of a God who learned to rest, who remembered what it meant to listen. The wind carries his name still, not as a warning, but as a lullaby, and in that breath between lightning and silence, the world sleeps in peace. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. Tonight the storm remembers, and the breath of the gods moves once more within you. The sky had always belonged to thunder. It had always worn the roar of Zeus like a crown of fire. But now the heavens were quiet, not empty, not still, but breathing. Zeus stood upon the edge of the firmament, where clouds met eternity. Below him, the mortal world shimmered with light. Villages glowing, rivers whispering, oceans breathing under the moon. He could feel every spark, every sigh, every silent wish, and each one moved through him, as though the world itself exhaled through his heart. He was no longer a god of command. He was a memory of balance. And yet, deep within that balance, something ancient stirred, a memory of chaos, a storm that had never quite died. For even silence, he realized, carries the seed of thunder. One night, as the moon leaned close to the horizon, Zeus felt the world call to him, not in prayer, but in pulse, the same pulse that had once called him from the void before creation. He closed his eyes. The wind touched his face like the breath of the first dawn, and within that stillness he heard it, a voice older than the stars. Do you remember, child of storm? It whispered, when the sky was not yours to command, but yours to become? He knew that voice. It was not Hera, nor Gaia, nor any god. It was the sky itself, the breath that had given him birth. Zeus fell to one knee, his thunder dimming. Mother, he said softly, I had forgotten your silence, and yet, the voice replied, you carried it within your thunder all along. Lightning shimmered around him, not in fury, but recognition. The clouds pulsed like veins of light, and in that vast heartbeat between worlds, Zeus felt what he had lost. The moment before creation, when everything was one. He rose, his eyes filled with light that was not his own. For the first time, he did not feel like a god. He felt like the sky, and the sky remembered. It remembered being whole. It remembered every storm that had sung it awake, every tear that had fallen as rain, every whisper that had built constellations. The universe unfolded before him, 1,000 galaxies, each breathing in rhythm. He saw stars born from the ashes of others. He saw comets carve dreams across the dark. He saw mortals look up and find hope in the same heavens that once trembled at his voice. And in that seeing he understood. Thunder was never meant to be power. It was meant to be memory. Zeus drifted downward once more. He crossed through the night air like a breeze that touched no leaf yet moved every heart. In a small valley by the sea, he found a child standing in the rain. The boy looked up, not in fear but in wonder. "Are you the storm?" the child asked. Zeus smiled faintly. "Once, perhaps. Then why are you quiet now?" The god knelt beside him, eyes reflecting the stormless sky. "Because even thunder must learn to listen." The boy reached out his hand, catching a drop of rain. "It sounds like singing," he said, and Zeus, for the first time in countless ages, laughed. A soft human sound. "Yes," he whispered, "the storm is singing." When the child left, the rain ceased, but its rhythm lingered, a melody in the air. Zeus followed it back into the clouds, and as he rose, he saw that every droplet below carried light. The light of gratitude, the light of remembrance, the light of the world learning to breathe on its own. It was not worship, it was harmony. On Olympus, Hera stood waiting. She watched him return, radiant yet quiet, his eyes filled with the reflection of dawn. "You've been gone long," she said gently. "I've been remembering," he replied. "What did you find?" He smiled, not as a god, but as one who had finally found home. "I found the first silence," he said, "and within it, every voice that ever was." She touched his hand, lightning to lightning, and for a moment the entire mountain seemed to hum with life. The gods above them stirred. Poseidon's tides calmed. Apollo's sun rose without flame. Athena's owl called into the night. Even the wind held its breath. And then, softly, the thunder rolled. Not in fury, but in blessing. For centuries thereafter, mortals told of a time when Zeus no longer ruled the sky, but became it. When storms spoke not of wrath, but of renewal. When lightning did not destroy, but remembered. They built no new temples, for none were needed. The sky itself was altar enough. When sailors crossed the sea, they whispered to the clouds, "Guide us gently, old thunder." When lovers met beneath the rain, they said, "The storm blesses us." And when lightning struck the horizon, the old would smile and murmur, "The god still breathes." But in truth, Zeus no longer dwelled apart. He was the breath in every breeze, the heartbeat in every storm, the warmth in every sunrise that dared to return after the dark. And each night, as the world slept, he would look down upon it, not as a king, but as a guardian of rhythm, a keeper of quiet thunder. He whispered to the stars, "Sleep well, my children. Dream of balance. Remember that every storm ends in light." And the stars, in their slow cosmic dance, answered him, a shimmer, a pulse, a song. In the heart of eternity, the storm that once shattered mountains, now rested in stillness deeper than oceans. Zeus closed his eyes, feeling the universe move through him. He was not the god of thunder anymore. He was the breath between lightning and dawn, the heartbeat between creation and silence. He was the sky that remembered its name. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. Tonight, the storm sleeps, but its breath moves through you, calm, eternal, awake.